Hello there, Monster Kid Radioheads. This is Kenny with a look at famous monsters of filmland. We just watched Shock with our spine-chilling prince, Vincent Price. The movie was mentioned briefly in FM's first article about the actor in Famous Monsters number 25 from October of 1963. It consists of material from 2 interviews, one done by an East Coast writer and one done by Forey on the set of a Corman Poe film. The article is 7 pages long and is loaded with 16 photos. Let's take a look at some highlights. It opens with this brief verse. The price of fame, the fame of Price. All prizes go, from the Invisible Man to the pick of Poe, to the actor who, after King Karloff, is the prince of horror players. It follows with this introduction from Forey, quoting from his interview. It has been humorously reported, said the impressively tall Mr. Price, that like Claude Rains, I couldn't be seen in my first horror picture, which was, Forey, reminisced, The Invisible Man Returns. I remember in 1940 when I was working at the Academy of Motion Pictures, learning that it was to be previewed and driving out to the nearby town of Glendale to see it. I remember seeing you in the lobby afterwards. At that time, I didn't dream that I'd be interviewing you all these years later. Except, he corrected, that wasn't the first horror picture in which I appeared. And then he went on to remind me that his then current role in The Raven was actually a reunion with Boris Karloff, with whom he had first played practically a quarter of a century previously in the 1939 version of Universal's Tower of London. The article continues with a straightforward biography of Price, from his birth in St. Louis through his acting career up to 1963. Price had this to say about what constitutes a horror film. Mr. Price differs on the generally accepted notion of what constitutes a horror picture. He considers that the type of picture he has become associated with is a thriller rather than a horror. I think there is a big difference between horror stories and my type of film, he told me. I class as horror pictures things like The Man with the Golden Arm, Sinatra's Dope Addiction Study, because they really horrify me. My efforts are basically entertainment ventures, and they provide escape for the average person. Today's movie was mentioned next. His next movie after The Invisible Man Returns in the thriller horror department was Shock, made for 20th Century Fox in 1946. It was the story of a murdering psychiatrist who went about stabbing innocent people with hypodermic needles loaded with a deadly poison. Price thought it excellent, though most critics had radically different opinions. The article continues in chronological order, covering briefly films like House of Wax, The Fly, and Return of the Fly. Price had this to say about that underrated sequel. The script of Return of the Fly was one of those rare cases when the sequel proved to be better than the original. When I first read it, I was very excited about the possibilities. Then the producers, in obvious bad judgment, proceeded to put in a lot of gimmicks in the belief that films today need gimmicks to be popular. In the end, they lessened and nearly ruined the dramatic effect that could have made a truly superior picture. Looks at the Castle and Corman classics follow. Price had this to say about Mr. Corman. Corman is wonderful. His talent, energy, and drive amaze me at times. I think House of Usher was the best film Matheson and he have done yet. We next see a list of upcoming films including now classic Confessions of an Opium Eater, Twice Told Tales, Haunted Palace, Last Man on Earth, and A Comedy of Terrors. It also mentions several films based on works by Lovecraft and an unmade H.G. Wells-based project. The one I, FJA, am most anxious to see him in, When the Sleeper Wakes. Between takes with Laurie, I asked Price what the long delay was on the Wells film, and he said, well, the trouble is, you see, it was written so long ago that science has caught up with many of the wonders in it, and we're waiting for someone to concoct a whole new set of marvels. The body of the article concludes with this quote from Mr. Price. His definition of what constitutes a good horror picture. Human interest superimposed on a far-out kind of plot. The Fly was wonderful because it had all the right elements. It showed the effect of a terrible disaster upon an average family. To be a good horror film, the story itself must have an element of surprise, And the theme must be divided between the people and the things. House of Usher had all of these as well. He added, "We need more like them." His ambition, eventually to direct a film, an adventure epic similar to Master of the World, but more realistic. At the end of the article is a list of 28 of the 75 films Price had appeared in that would be of most interest for the Famous Monster audience. That is all for this special video edition of A Look at Famous Monsters. We will have more a little bit later after Creature of Destruction. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.